So you've been named, one of the hottest startups in Europe. You've been awarded the fastest growing startup in Europe. And you've also been named one of the few tech companies in Sweden that's been valued at over 1 billion SEK. And correct me here if I'm wrong, the last valuation puts you at like a whopping 3.5 billion Swedish kroners. Is that right?
Yeah, sounds about right.
And that's huge, of course. And I am so excited to have you here today because I want to dig deep into this journey. I know you've been a huge part of this journey, right? And before we dig deep into the whole journey, I'm going to hit you with a few fast questions. Answer them the way you want to, of course, but I do this rapid fire round because I want to give people, the listeners, like a real good intro to who I'm having with me today.
That's good.
We dig deep to it. So before we start, right? So tell me, who are you and what's your role?
So my name is Fredrik, or Fredrik Mellander.
Yeah.
As Teamtailor, everybody knows me as Mellander. Nobody actually refers to me as Fredrik because we have two Fredriks.
Okay.
Which is quite fun. I'm the head of partnerships, which means I manage the people in the team that leads and does everything partnership related at Teamtailor. Been there for 7 years-ish. So I live with my girlfriend south of Stockholm. I play a lot of golf when I have the opportunity to. I love skiing. Grew up in Stockholm, born and raised. Always difficult to say what else there is to know because there's always, you can go so deep down the rabbit hole and you can just stay somewhat shallow as well, of course.
Yeah, true. No, we'll be having time to dig deeper into that, of course. What category would you put Teamtailor in?
HR tech or recruiting tech. I think like the main category is probably HR tech, but within HR tech, there's definitely recruiting tech. So the ATS is probably the best, most accurate description.
Yeah, got you. What problems do you solve and why does that matter?
So we solve helping companies recruit more easily in assessments. It's a CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot or wherever that may be, but for the recruiting team. So anything that comes with recruiting, our platform helps companies solve that. So for managing candidates, publishing jobs, making themselves look pretty on their career sites, everything in anything. Like our goal and mantra is to do everything from the first impression of the candidate till the first week, and help companies support that journey by streamlining the interview process, making sure that they can manage them and make sure that the candidates actually have a really good experience throughout the process as well.
Got you. And then there was a two-part to this question. And why do you think that matters? Like what the problems that you solve? Why do you think that's important?
I think there's multiple answers to that question. Yeah. I think depending on who you ask, there's certain companies who are really struggling to find people that they need to be really effective at actually nailing the process whenever they do get qualified candidates to come in through the process. So having our platform in place allows them to quality ensure their process, to ensure that they have a good reputation among other people because it's a small pool that they're fishing in. Some people have a lot of candidates applying for their jobs and they need to help ease the burden for the hiring team and so forth. And for some, it's just about making sure that they are more visible to be able to be found by these people who want to find their new next adventure.
Yeah, got you. And then how long have you been in business?
So we celebrated 10 years last September.
Okay.
I think.
Big congratulations.
Yeah, it was fun. We celebrated it on a company retreat in Sicily, which was incredible.
Nice. We did our last company retreat in Gothenburg.
No.
Not the same, but it was still
fun. We'll get there in 10 years.
For sure. How long? No, sorry. Like, who would you say is your ICP?
This is actually a difficult question, and it's become more difficult as of late because it varies significantly in most regions.
Yeah.
So we're a global business and have operations in practically every corner of the world. In some regions, it's much more enterprise or upscale markets. In some markets, it's entirely SMB focused. We're entirely industry agnostic. We can sell to typically any type of company and any type of industry. So for us, the ICP is generally that they need something modern. They want to be a good employer and somebody who actually cares about their candidates and the way they recruit, and more or less than size or vertical or things like that.
Okay, so you're saying basically it doesn't really matter if there's like a small company of 10 employees and the enterprises of 2,000 plus employees?
In practice, no. Like we have customers ranging from like 1 employee to tens of thousands of employees, and they use practically the same product with smaller differences. And recruiting is a universal problem that any company who is growing generally needs to hire, which means we can hit every single vertical. So for us, it's more about the buyer persona and the company persona. That we know that the ones who fit us best are the more modern approach type of companies, and those who actually care about the way they look, the way they treat their candidates, and the way they do things, rather than a specific vertical size and things like that.
Yeah, got you. Just taking a note here because I want to get back to this because I think this is an interesting perspective. How are you funded today? Privately, or do you do a VC round?
We did do 2 VC rounds, but we did our first VC round in 2020, then did a follow-up VC round 2021 or 2022. Kind of 2022 must have been. But we are practically like a self-funded. Like we raised that money in order to have something to support us in case we wanted to fuel our growth, but we barely touched it. So we've up until that point pretty much been bootstrapped, and we're trying to still remain with the bootstrap mentality despite having a larger war coffin, but using that for opportunities when we actually see opportunities to scale.
Gotcha. Nice. What is your current ARR? Roughly.
Just shy of 500 million ARR. SEK, I think. Actually, I don't have the latest number, but somewhere in that range. I think if I had to guess, because I know that we crossed the 400 mil later half of last year.
Okay. Sweet. That's impressive. Nice. Great. So that's the first sort of rapid fire round. Let's dig a little bit deeper then.
Let's do it.
I told you that we had a part here which was about your personal background, and you start this journey wherever you want. But my first question is, how did you end up in SaaS and why?
Honestly, the true answer is by coincidence. I have a sales background, did sales before I ended up at Teamtailor. And when I started Teamtailor, I did sales as well. I started off my sales career as a field salesman, knocking on doors, trying to sell people in their houses. And then I transferred into an industry that I wasn't as keen on because I didn't really feel connected to the product. So I was trying to look for a company where I actually liked the product that I was selling. And by coincidence, at that stage, that was Teamtailor because I just saw that it was visually appealing to me. So I took a leap of faith. It wasn't a secure bet, but I needed to feel like this seems like they built something cool. And that was 7 years ago. And back then we were like 13, 15 people, something in that range.
How far into, like how many years had they been running before you joined?
So they had been running for a few years. So I joined beginning of 2017, and the company was officially founded and registered in the end of 2013. But it really started taking off in 2015. That's up until then, that's when the curve actually started getting some traction. So when I joined, we had a few hundred customers and we had a team of a few people. But it was the bell curve or the hockey stick really started in 2017 because that's when we really hit product market fit and we actually had something competitive to really, really start scaling with. At least in my opinion, it might be different if you ask somebody else. But looking at it, that's when it really took off, and they had built a really, really solid foundation. When I got there, they had built a really, really good product. They had all of the core pillars of the sales team. And then 2017, we just scaled the sales team and scaled the operations, which allowed us to take the next leap.
Gotcha. Nice. What would you say, what are your disciplines? What puts you in sales and partnerships rather than, developing, or what kind of disciplines do you feel like this is what I bring and this is what I like and this is?
Being very stereotypical, I am an outgoing person. I love meeting people. I love the physical connection with meeting people in person in any shape or form. And I think that is one of the things that drove me towards sales. And then there are so many different elements of what does sales, makes somebody successful within sales. For me, one of my driving factors and one of my driving motivators is personal growth and development. And I feel like there's always something new you can learn on how you learn how to tackle somebody or learn how to tackle a certain scenario within sales, which is why I always enjoyed it and made it, have had an okay career in it, because I feel like it's always been a carrot for me to chase, not in terms of money or something like titles. It's always been I can learn this, I can learn this, I can do that, I can learn how to approach this. So it's always felt like an endless opportunity.
Got you. Gotcha. Were you schooled in SaaS? Were you schooled in business? Like, how did you end up in business overall? Like, what did you do before you started working in SaaS?
I went from high school directly to field sales. So I was like indoctrinated. Like my first job was sales, and I just skipped that route because when I finished high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had one of those pieces where, like, initially before high school, I was a very outgoing person. Then I had a few years where I became more introverted.
Yeah.
And so I picked a line in high school, which was a lot more focused on like data and developing and things like that. And I never really stuck with it because I'd never really enjoyed it long term.
Yeah.
So when I left high school, I wanted to somewhat like broaden my horizon again, which led me to sales.
Yeah.
And there I just thrived. It was like I found home. So there was no point of me pursuing something else because I enjoyed it from the get-go, and I just continued growing from that path.
Got you. And then from field sales, did you say that you went from the field sales and then into Teamtailor, or did you do anything else before?
So I did field sales where I essentially sold like fiber and telecommunications and things like that. And then
like the traditional door-to-door method.
Traditional door-to-door, like I was selling basically alarms or like vacuums, but I was selling a different product.
Gotcha.
And then I went into an IT business where we were selling like printers and like switchboards and IT outsourcing companies. And I never really hit my stride there because I never felt properly connected. So when I started venturing out there, I felt like I needed to find something that I felt connected with, where I could feel like I was thriving in the culture and with the product and that kind of stuff, which led me to start looking for something new, which eventually led to me taking the leap of faith, Teamtailor.
Nice. Got you. Nice, man. Well, then let's look at a particular part of this show, which is around growth metrics. As you know, we are, at Business Wit, we are this marketplace where we talk to a lot of SaaS people. We see SaaS companies grow. We see SaaS companies, that has huge ambitions but never really reach those because it's a difficult market. Like any business, any type of business that you start has no guarantees, basically, as you know. And so one part of this show was that we wanted to actually know, well, then what matters to these companies? Like, what are the similarities? And I know it's different depending on what type of company you are. But I wanted to ask you, when it comes to growth, what typically matters to you? Like, what do you measure? Like top level metrics. And let's start there now, for example, and then let's dig deeper and then say, what's been going on throughout the journey. So
I think now the current state we're in, like, it's a lot of things we're looking at from every aspect of the opportunity, because we want to understand how do we make the best kind of impact for our users, for our team, for the product, in order to actually scale as efficiently as possible.
Right.
So all of the things from like the traditional like ARR, CAC, like lifetime value, ACV, close rate, like deal velocity, like the traditional sales metrics that we're really looking at. How effective are we in the sales process? How effective is it to actually acquire each of these customers? But then we're also looking at that in comparison with like the customer success, like happiness rating from how happy are users when they're scoring our support team, how happy is the team, how happy is like the NPS. Those are equally as important in a sense, because we know that all of the hard work we've done to get the customer and to do that won't matter if we don't nail that as well. So it's like Teamtailor's historically very much been sales driven, but it's always been anchored by the customer success team and the customer satisfaction aspect of it, which I think has allowed us to do a lot of these things. And it's like we've always tracked it to some extent, but it's in recent years where we've really like started nailing it and really tried to understand all of the layers beneath it. Up until then, it was much more fluid. Like we needed to make sure that we closed customers and that it didn't cost us more to acquire them than it was for us actually to close them. And that we could keep them on for as long as possible. Got you.
But then if you step into, let's say you guys step into a, quarterly meeting, what are some of the KPIs, the metrics that you hear the most often?
That's actually one of the things that makes Teamtailor quite remarkable. We don't talk for us, it's not as much about the business lingo. On our quarterly reports and those meetings, like the all hands that we have a small slide where we highlight the CAC and the customer's NPS and how much we've grown and the new revenue and churn and so forth. But For us, it's more about like, okay, how many new users and how many new customers did we get? Because that piles up and then that gets to a compounding force.
Right.
But on those meetings, of course, we look at the core metrics from a SaaS business, like the churn, the net revenue retention, the CAC, the ARR, the average customer value, and those kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And then we try to look at those individually for different market segments and things like that. Of course.
And I know you mentioned also, you said that Teamtailor has traditionally been very sales driven, which then, of course, I can understand that sales metrics would be the things that you look at in the beginning, right? And in your 7 years at Teamtailor, how has those metrics changed? Do you see from like when you started, for example, like, I don't know, in the middle of the journey, and like now, would you say it's been typically the same, or are you looking at different things today that you didn't look at before?
I wouldn't say we're looking at different things particularly. In the beginning, it was the same core principles that we cared about. We wanted to make sure that we could acquire customers, that we could keep those customers, and we could keep those customers happy, and how long it took and how efficient we were. The more effective we got, the bigger we got, the more things we were able to start tracking, because we got more mature and more skilled at looking at the data and setting the infrastructure for it. So I'd say it's more that we've added things to the layers rather than and just kept the original core. Like in terms of growth, sales has always been the driving factor for Teamtailor, but it's also been a very product-driven organization. So a lot of the metrics that we've celebrated as a company haven't been the sales metrics. It's been the users and the customer satisfaction scores and that kind of stuff, because that in some way leads to the sales.
Right.
You can't do one without the other.
True. Very true. Did you see a pivotal point where growth kind of, happened more rapidly? And what do you think brought that change?
I think for us, it came down to product market fit and actually validation at a certain point. Like when we were starting out and Teamtailor was starting out the first initial years, we came into a competitive landscape. Every single market has a few competitors, and we were not the first ones. We did not have a first mover or third mover or seventh mover advantage. We needed to fight to a certain point in order to prove our product and to prove our brand and that kind of stuff. And at a certain point towards the latter half of 2017, we had acquired enough customers. Some of them were pretty cool brands, and we started understanding how we should sell the product, and the product was getting really, really good, which allowed us to actually just go with that flow. In a sense, it became easier because the product matured, that it allowed us to actually, the historical things the customers said no to, they weren't saying no to, because we had those features and we had the validation and we had those things. So for us, there was just keep going and continue adding more salespeople and make them effective, because we figure out the formula at that point.
Gotcha.
And in terms of the hockey stick growth, I think it just comes down to at that point we had a few million in ARR, and then we doubled that, and then we doubled that, and the compounding interest, of course, makes it look like a hockey curve, because the doubling of something bigger always makes it look bigger.
Gotcha. As you said before, I think this is super interesting. Like you're coming into a space where there's some competition. You're saying you're not the first, second, third movers. What is it that you think made or makes Teamtailor grow like this?
The product. All things considered. That's always been our strong suit, and it's always been the core philosophy. I think it's interesting that we've gotten a lot of praise and that kind of stuff for being the fastest growing and the fastest this and evaluated at this and that kind of stuff. But that's never been something that we've celebrated and been highlighted internally. For us, it's been we've hit 100,000 users. We've got this kind of customer satisfaction. We built a really cool product, and we're getting a praise from a HR person at this company that we really like, is just saying that we love Teamtailor. That has been more valuable than getting the PR say, hey, Teamtailor's valued at X amount of money.
Right.
And up until a certain point, we didn't do traditional marketing. Instead of investing money into marketing to fuel growth, we invested the money into the product to make the product sell itself, in a sense.
Gotcha.
So in the core of Teamtailor, and what makes Teamtailor so successful is the brilliance of the people building the product and the product that they've built.
Right.
Because it is fantastic. And I think that's what has allowed us to both get the traction locally, regionally, and then internationally and globally.
Gotcha. Interesting. Also, you're saying that you didn't put. Well, I'm sure that the marketing budget is bigger now than it was in the beginning, of course. But you said that you didn't put a lot of marketing dollars into the growth engine. What do you think? Well, how do you think people got to know about you? And so on?
I think we were really fortunate, and that's also one of the brilliances of Teamtailor, that we didn't need a marketing budget in a sense, because we had a really high word of mouth.
Yeah.
People bought Teamtailor, and they recommended that to the people that they knew. When they left the company, they bought Teamtailor at the next company.
Right.
But we've also, the product in itself is an incredible marketing tool. Like if you see it, you'll see that Teamtailor stands out. You go to a company's website, you'll see that it's a marketing page, certain emails and things like that. So in many ways, we really started driving like the product-led marketing aspect.
Okay.
Instead of just having a marketing team that does everything like that and just put full into content and paid ads and that kind of stuff. We just fuel that into the product and let the product show itself in places where it eventually started building brand awareness. And then investing in customer success and a great product allowed us to create a really, really solid word of mouth engine as well.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, of course, it makes sense. And I think that's a position where a lot of companies would like to be in, right? In terms of, incoming requests versus outbound, calling and so on, or outreach, for example, in rough terms, like what would you say is the split here? Like, would you say that the majority of the clients coming to you are coming knocking at your door? Or would you say it's more of an outreach-based method?
It has always been a bit of both, despite us having a marketing budget or not.
Yeah.
And it's also one of those things that it depends on the market for us. But if we're looking at Sweden, I think it's like half and half, if I'm not entirely mistaken right now, because we do get a lot of word of mouth. We've become more effective at actually more traditional marketing. And then we still have a really solid outbound engine with the sales team that is doing an incredible job, cold calling, emailing, going to actually brute force their way into conversations as well.
Yeah, got you. Interesting. And also, let's stay a little bit in the, you mentioned the Swedish perspective and the sort of kind of Scandinavian Europe and then international. When you started, this was, you said 2017?
Yeah.
No, yeah. Were you present only in Sweden at that time, or did you have...
We had, in the beginning of 2017, we started up in the UK. So we sent one of our sales reps over to the UK for him to start setting the foundation. We had pretty much just hired a salesperson in Finland.
Yeah.
But it was in 2017 that we really started getting some traction in the UK and in Finland. So that's the year our international expansion actually started.
Okay.
I think that the employee in Finland started in 2016. So 2017 was the year that we actually started getting to a certain point. And in 2017, we started doing the UK. And in 2018, the UK started getting some kind of traction.
Yeah.
And then we started following that with Norway in end of 2017. Tried out Denmark. We had France coming quite soon after, and just naturally grew depending on if we found really good people, if we found some really good traction, we had some good partners, we had some good something like that. That's what dictated our growth internationally. That we didn't just say, hey, let's fully invest and spend all the money on doing this.
Okay.
We probed the market, sent somebody out there trying to understand how does it work, what do we need to do in this market, and then just slowly built out.
Okay.
The philosophy has always been that we've said that we have a Navy SEALs that go in beforehand, and then once they've probed the market, they know how it's going on, then we'll send the full artillery.
Okay.
So that's always been our team, and we still have the same approach today, where we have a sales team that is rest of the world, where they have a few markets that they're trying to target, and they're just trying to get as much traction and understand the market and get us validation for us to fully commit into opening and expanding into that market.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you know more now than you knew then, of course, into how to actually enter into a new market. But it's also interesting to hear about how you were thinking about it early on. You were mentioning you started getting some traction in different countries like Finland, which is more close by, right? UK, which is all semi close by. When you say we started seeing some traction, did you start seeing incoming requests from those countries, or did you start seeing, I don't know, when you sent salespeople over there, was that the first thing you did before you even saw incoming requests from those countries? Tell me a little bit about that start.
At the beginning, the first two markets, so France and the first couple of markets, we essentially said, hey, let's hire a person that we really believe in, who's a great person, and let that person probe the market to figure out the path that we need to do in order to start getting the growth.
More like boots on the ground.
Yeah,
calling,
in one way, shape,
events.
or form. So the first couple of markets, it was hey, let's get a person who's doing something and let that person just go out and trial and error to find what kind of ways do we need, what's the ICP for that market, what are the obstacles that we have. subsequent markets have more or less followed, in some ways, a similar trajectory because we found a really, really good person that we just believe in and think that this person and the market is mature for us.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's been because we've had a customer buy it in Sweden and they also buy it in Canada, and the Canadian branch starts loving it, and then they start seeing something else, and we see some traction, and then we start probing it briefly with a person from Sweden and just see, hey, is there any traction? And then once we start getting some kind of positive feedback loops, we can start investing more and more and more and more instead of going head over heels directly.
True. And that's a very interesting perspective, because I think that this so much ties into, as you said in the beginning, like having a good product kind of solves a lot of the the issues. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like, okay, as long as you have a good product, then you can, grow as fast as you want, because we see a lot of good products out there that does not see the type of growth that you guys have seen.
Of course.
But when you're mentioning like when for example, one client in Sweden also wants to use the same product in their other markets, that's such a proof that this is actually working. It's good. And the step to actually using it in another country is not that big. So let's just do it, right? So I think it comes back to actually having a really good product. And this is really a true testament to that. And I wanted to understand more, like, when it comes to these types of markets that you are working in now. Of course, you've seen some successful markets, like I know, of course, Sweden, where you guys were founded. Of course, the Scandinavian countries and so on, I think is an easier step. Do you see markets that you have tried to enter that was not so successful? And would you mind talking a little bit about that and why, maybe?
I think it's the historically, which is funnily enough, the most difficult market for us historically has been Denmark. Which is
I keep hearing that.
A typical probe for Swedish companies. Just go head over heels in Denmark. Figure it's going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
But you need to have a very specific approach for it. You need to speak Danish. You need to be a Danish one. They're very like nationalistic. That they want like a Danish person in a Danish company to do something.
Right.
They're not as fond of foreigners in a sense. Whilst a lot of companies are more keen on that. And it's also unfortunate that it's such a small market. So you're not like, if you had the opportunity to invest in a French-speaking office and a French-speaking team and a French-speaking salesperson, start getting that market versus Denmark, the upside is much larger in France or Germany or the UK or Spain or any of the bigger European markets, which means you tend to invest that in the bigger markets because there's a huge upside, and you don't tend to do it because Denmark is a relatively small country, and you just tend to encircle it from other markets. We've seen some markets where we historically suffered because of a historically stronger competitor. So like the Benelux historically was a difficult market due to local competitors. Then we've matured, we've become better at our go-to-market strategy, our product has matured and that kind of stuff. So now we're doing a resurgence towards the Benelux and that kind of stuff, and we're seeing great results. So it's also timing based, a lot of it, and some of the learnings you find along the way.
Of course, that makes sense. Do you see are there any particular markets now that you see, are contributing to the majority of your growth? Because it's gonna be a long question, so let's break it up a little bit. But of course, you've been in Sweden for a long time. You've been in neighboring countries, even though I understand that Denmark has been historically difficult. But do you see? Because at one point, I think you can kind of reach the ceiling, right? So I imagine that
to some extent, but
in like a small, like a small country like Sweden, for example. You tell me. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's typically the case for Swedish founded companies because the market is rather small, and then you gotta go elsewhere, right? But I want to come back to this because I see you hesitating a little bit. But then, do you see now in 2024, like last year, do you see any types of markets that are contributing to majorly contributing to your growth? Like any?
Definitely. We're seeing great success in France, the UK, Spain, particularly those we've really hit our stride, starting getting the same kind of market validation that we had in Sweden in 2017. So people know about us. It's not the same when you cold call somebody. It's not like who's Teamtailor. Like they actually might have heard about Teamtailor, which makes the conversation so much easier. So for us, we're seeing great results in those markets, for example, in the key European markets, specifically Spain, UK, and France, are the driving force of the international expansion. And for us, we're of course trying to diversify, so we have multiple presence instead of putting all of our eggs in one basket. But we're seeing really good trends in a lot of markets. But these are the ones that we've either had a few years to build build it up. So it's not the first year, and we've had the years of trial and error and mistakes along the way. And now we're just starting to use those learnings to really execute and have built up the product market fit in those markets. But we're seeing a really positive trends in a lot of markets, which is fun to see.
Yeah, interesting. Of course, you can't talk about growth and not mention the word product market fit. So when you say that, and I want to understand more, do you know? Or let me phrase this right. Are you using the same product in every country, or are you customizing it majorly in any of these markets?
No, it is practically the same product. Differences is localization. So it's in French in France, it's in Spanish in Spain. But all of the core features are the same, and you have access to the same things in different markets. They're like, and we're also fortunate in a sense that, like, when we come back to the discussion we had before about like we can sell to any type of customers, the regulations aren't super difficult either for us to enter a new market. They are, of course, different regulations for different markets, but in some industries and some verticals, they have huge obstacles that they need to go to because the way they do business in France versus Spain is radically different, which means you need to rebuild the product. For us, we don't have that obstacle, which is great from a growth standpoint. But we still need to take Teamtailor and just apply the local market presence to it in terms of the way we do branding, the way we communicate, the way we do things, but the core product is the same.
Okay, got you. What type of difference do you see then when it comes to finding product market fit? And I know this is of course can be a difficult question to answer, but let's try it out. Like entering the French market, I'm guessing you localize the marketing, the copy, and everything. Is that true, or is that my assumption?
We do now, yeah.
Yeah, you do. Did you notice any difference in the beginning, like when you tried sort of English versus local language?
Much harder when you don't do it. But it's also, we did get some traction enough to do it. We were able to single out a niche that weren't as keen on, that it wasn't as important for it to be French. And then we could start investing in it there. But a lot of these European markets are very proud of their own country and their own language and that kind of stuff, which makes it need to localize it very quite a lot. So it took us quite a long time to actually make the product in another language than English. That was a few years into our international expansion, and we already had some traction and some people boots on the ground in other markets when we took that step to actually like, hey, let's make our product available in a lot of different languages and let's start hiring teams of support, marketing, sales to actually do it.
No, it's interesting because we're also talking about this a lot at Business With. As you know, like we have a presence we're a Swedish founded company, but we work in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, also talking about Germany and the Netherlands and so on. And one of the things that we talk about is, of course, like, do we actually communicate in this market in the local language, or is it good enough in English, right? And that's why it's very interesting to hear it from a perspective from you guys who's obviously done it, right?
Yeah, I think it varies. Like Swedes like to be told that people speak Swedish to you, but we don't generally tend to be as negative if somebody speaks English, because we speak English quite well. We're brought up with English on TV and some music and all that kind of stuff. So for us, it's not as big of a leap. But it opens up new avenues of customers. Like for us, that comes down to the ICP kind of questions when you're doing the go-to-market into a new market. If you don't have the localization, you need to find a niche that doesn't care about that localization. For us, that could have been startups in certain markets where they are generally more international and they speak English as their primary language. And even if they're German, French, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever, English is their language. So we could start getting that niche. And if we were fortunate, then one of those customers became really successful. And then they started becoming a brand known that everybody saw. And we could ride their wave because when they posted jobs, they saw Teamtailor. And so it comes down to the ICP structure in a sense that we nailed, okay, who can we sell with the product that we have? In a market, it's the big ones. In a market, it's the small ones. And here's the vertical there, in this kind of industry. And as we localized, that broadened our ICP. It's probably the easiest way I would say.
Interesting. And I know this is also going to be very difficult to summarize, but as we said before we started, like this is supposed to be a long format. Like, feel free to expand on it. But I would say when it comes to like the general growth perspective, what are some of your like most impactful learnings on this journey that you've been, or most memorable learnings and so on that you feel like, man, this has been, it's been a privilege to see this. Like, this is something that I am truly proud of. This is something that I've learned a lot about, and so on. When it comes to this perspective of Teamtailor, I would say.
Oh, it's a difficult one.
I know. But let's stay on it a little bit.
But, and I think there's multiple answers to it, and it varies on person and region and so forth. For me, some of the key things has just been having the right person can do so much. We've had certain markets that single-handedly have been broken up by a individual at the company who's done a tremendous work. And without these individuals, that market wouldn't be where they're at currently. And just the creativeness and just having a person who just sees it as, okay, here's an obstacle that I need to solve, instead of just like, I need to do this traditional approach. How important that is from a growth standpoint, because then you will find these paths, because there's like, even if it's a brick wall, there will still be some holes, and you just need to find those holes. And once you're breaking through, you're done. From a like bias standpoint, how important partnerships has been to some of these markets, because we've been able to leverage existing trust with our users and have somebody who can help us, like take us along the way, where we're like, we're their child and they're just taking us along the way to their customers, which has been super impactful. And just understanding how much business has variations, but also so much similarities. I think a lot of people are very quick to judge that French is very different, Spanish is very different, and they are. Like, there are big differences, but there's still so many principles and foundations that are the same. And you can build a foundation with your team that allows anybody across market and team and that kind of stuff to have those core principles about how do we do things, how we pitch the product, how we do a needs analysis, whatever it may be. And then you just add those specific layers for the specific markets. So you can still build a scalable function, and you have 5% that needs to be customized instead of customizing everything for every single market. I think those are like the three core things that I can think of right now.
And what about yourself, like personally then? That's on a very professional level. And what about yourself? Like, tell me about your learnings personally along this journey.
I think a lot of those ones are from my own perspective as well, because I've realized that doing it the hard way. Like when I started doing partnerships, I built it from scratch, and there was so many different things that we could do, and I had to learn the hard way. And I was practically building the company within the company, because I had to do the sales, I had to do the marketing, I had to do the tech to build the integration, I had to do the finance stuff to get all that kind of stuff out. And that was super important for me to understand it. For me, that also led to me doing like events and webinars and whatever, and speak towards our customer audience, which led me to understand their needs in a much better way, that allowed me to customize the messages about how we actually get to that point, instead of just being naive, like somebody told me that this is the right way. Actually listen to them and was what you actually want, what are the needs that you have, and you were able to use the same spin on it, which has been really impactful. But I think it's such a different one, because I've been very involved in some ways, but I've also been not as involved in some ways. I've been more supporting from the back with a lot of our like traditional growth. So like if we open up a market, I'm not the first person there spearheading it. I'm not there in the market. It's usually a person doing something either from here or from there. And I speak to them and get their learnings from them. And I try to support them in ways where from the impact that I get. So I think the first answer actually reflects on my professional answer and my individual answers as well. Because it's experiences that I've seen myself doing this journey and winning a few occasions.
Gotcha.
But it's a very difficult question, because
I know for sure. And I know there's not like, I was not looking for like a list of like 1 to 5 things that you know, or like my top 5 learnings. Some people like that, but I understand it's very difficult to summarize in that. But I just wanted to ask you, because I think you've been a part of something that's very unique. Not a lot of people get to see that journey, and so I wanted to pick your brain on that. But I'm sure I'll be coming back to that as well.
Looking forward to
it. Let's look a little bit on. You've been mentioning partnership, and this is like the big segment that I want to spend some time on.
Finally,
right. Let's back up a little bit, right? Let's do this from perspective of somebody that doesn't even know what this is. So, like, what does a partnership manager do, or like a head of partnerships do? Like, tell me about that first.
Oh yeah, it's a difficult one, and it's also one of the things that made it really, really fun for me over the years, because my job is, I've had the same title for 6 years. I've been the head of partnerships, and before, like when I started the role, I had the head of partnerships, which might not be accurate to do in hindsight. But it's been a different job every single year, which has been part of the fun.
Right.
For me, it's about orchestrating the team, setting the plan for the team, helping my team, coach the team, set the vision, put the strategies, optimize and set the structures, work a lot with internal stakeholders to pave the way for my team and for the partners that we're building relationships with to actually succeed. That's most of my job. What I'm doing right now is like internal puzzling in a sense. Like, how do I get sales to do this? How do I get them engaged? How do I make these sales managers work with us? And how do I understand what's in it for them? And how do I make my team aligned? And how do I make sure that they are going towards the same path, but not in the same path? That's where my job is now. When I started out, it was about me trying to understand, what do we need as for partnerships at Teamtailor?